Teachings of an Initiate, Chapter 12, The Scientific Method of Spiritual Unfoldment, Part 2, Retrospection, a Means of Avoiding Purgatory. We saw in the last chapter that a record resembling a picture film of our life from the cradle to the grave is inscribed upon a little atom in the heart by the action of the ether which we inhale with every breath, and which carries with it a picture of the outside world in which we are living and moving at the time. This forms the basis of our post-mortem existence, the record of deeds of wrongdoing being eradicated in a painful purgatorial experience caused by the fire of remorse, which sears the soul as the pictures of its misdeeds unroll before its gaze, thus making it less prone to repeat the same wrongdoing and mistakes in future lives. The reaction from the pictures where good was done is a heavenly joy, the subconscious remembrance of which will in latter lives prompt the soul to do more good. I'll read that again. The reaction from the pictures where good was done is a heavenly joy, the subconscious remembrance of which will in later lives prompt the soul to do more good. But this process is necessarily so, and may be likened to the action and operation of the old mill wheel. However, it is the way designed by nature to teach humanity how to walk circumspectly and obey her laws. By this slow process, the greater part of humanity is gradually evolving from egoism to altruism, and though exceedingly slow, it seems to be the only method by which they will learn. There is another class which has caught a glimpse of a vision and sees in the distant future a glorified humanity, expressly all the divine attributes and living a life of love and peace. That class is aiming its bow of aspiration at the stars, and is endeavoring to attain in one or a few short lives what its fellow men will require hundreds of embodiments to accomplish. To that end they, like the pioneers in the harnessing of the waters and the scientific transmission of electricity, are seeking for a scientific method which will eliminate the waste of time and energy involved in the slow process of evolution, and enable them to do the great work of self-unfoldment scientifically and without waste of energy. That was the problem which the early Rosicrucians set themselves to solve, and having discovered this method, they are now teaching the same of their faithful followers, to the eternal welfare of all who aspire and persevere. Just as the engineers who undertook to improve the primitive mill wheel and accomplish the transmission of electricity to distant points achieved their objective by first studying the effects and defects of the primitive device, so also the elder brothers of the Rosicrucians first studied by the aid of their spiritual sight all the phases of ordinary human evolution in the post-mortem state as well as in the physical world, so that they might determine how through many lives progress is gradually attained. They also studied such glyphs and symbols as had been given to humanity throughout the ages, to aid them in soul growth, notably the tabernacle in the wilderness, which, as Paul says, was a shadow of better things to come, and they found the secret of soul growth hidden in the various appliances and appurtenances, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, used in that ancient place of worship, as the scenes in the life panorama which unrolls before the eyes of the soul after death cause a suffering in purgatory which cleanses the soul from a desire to repeat the offenses which generated those pictures, so the salt wherewith the sacrifices upon the altar of burnt offerings in the tabernacle in the wilderness were rubbed before the being placed before the altar, and the fire wherewith they were consumed symbolized a double fiery pain similar to that felt by the soul in purgatory. Confident in the Hermetic axiom, "as above so below," in capitals, they evolved the method of retrospection as being in harmony with the cosmic laws of soul growth, and capable of accomplishing day by day that which the purgatorial experience does only one in a lifetime, namely cleansing the soul from sin by the fire of remorse. But when we say retrospection, it happens not infrequently that people say, "Oh, that is taught by other religious bodies, and I have practiced it all my life. I examine the day's doings every evening before going to sleep." Close quote. So far so good, but that is not sufficient. In order to perform this exercise scientifically, it is necessary to follow the process of nature as the electrician did when he desired to insulate the electric current from the ground and found that glass, porcelain, and fiber would act as a barrier to this passage. We must conform in every particular in every particular to the process of nature and her methods of attaining soul growth. When we study the purgatorial expiation, we find that the life panorama is unfolded in reverse order, capitals, from the grave to the cradle, scenes that were enacted late in life being taken up for expiation first, and those which occurred in early youth being the last to be dealt with. This, in order to show the soul how certain effects, capital, in life were brought about causes, capital, generated at an early stage. Similarly, the scientific method of soul unfoldment requires that the aspirant must examine his life every evening before going to sleep, starting with the scenes which were enacted late in the evening, just prior to retiring for the night, then gradually proceeding in reverse order towards the things which were done in the afternoon, then those which took place in the morning, and back to the very moment of awakening. But also, and this is very important, it is not sufficient to merely examine these scenes in a perfunctory way and admit being sorry when one comes to a scene where one was unkind or unjust to another person. There, the glyph contained in the altar of burnt offerings gives specific instruction. Just as the sacrifices were rubbed with salt, which, as everyone knows, burns and smarts exceedingly when rubbed into a wound, and just as fire, such as it is applied on the altar of wood offerings to the sacrifice, consumes the same offerings, so also the aspirant to soul growth must realize that he is both priest and sacrifice, the altar and the fire burning thereon. He must allow the salt and the fire of remorse to burn. He must allow the salt and the fire of remorse to burn and sear into his very heart a deep felt contrition at the thought of whatever wrong he has done. For only such a deep and serious treatment of the matter will wash the record away from the seed atom in the heart and leave it clean. And unless that is done, nothing has been accomplished. But if the aspirant to scientific soul unfoldment succeed in making this fire of remorse and contrition sufficiently intense, then the seed atom will be cleansed of the sin committed day by day throughout the life. And even the things that have taken place before such experiences were taken up will gradually disappear after that cleansing fire, so that at the end of life, when the silver cord has been loosened, the aspirant find himself without any panorama of life to take up his attention, such as all ordinary people are occupied with who have not been fortunate enough to be taught and to be practiced this scientific method. The result then is that instead of having to spend in purgatorial expiation a period of time about one third as long as the life lived in the dense body, he he who steadily and unwaveringly practices this method finds himself as a free lance in the invisible world, not bound by limitations which hold and fetter all others, and therefore free to use his entire time while in the lower regions in the service of suffering humanity. But there is a great difference between the opportunities there and here. Here, one third of our life is taken up with rest and recuperation, another third is taken up in work so that we may obtain the wherewithal to keep this physical body fed, clothed, and housed, and only the other third is at all available for the purposes of rest, recreation, or soul growth. It is different in the desire world where the spirit finds itself after death. The bodies in which we function there do not require food or raiment, neither do they need shelter. They are not subject to fatigue either, so that instead of spending two-thirds of the time, as here, in providing the necessaries of the body, the spirit is there free to use its instruments the whole 24 hours, day after day. Therefore, the time saved in the invisible world by having lived our purgatory day by day is the equivalent of that portion of an entire earth life which spends in work. Also, during all that time thus saved, no thought or care need be given to anything else but how we may help to further the scheme of evolution and aid our younger and less fortunate brothers. Thus we reap a rich harvest and make more soul growth in that post-mortem existence than would be possible in several ordinary lives. When we are reborn, we then find ourselves with all the soul powers thus acquired and must further along upon the path of evolution that we could possibly have under ordinary circumstances. It is also noteworthy that while other methods of soul unfoldment evolved and taught by other schools carry with them danger which sometimes may bring those who practice them into the insane asylum, the scientific method of soul unfoldment advocated by the elder brothers of the Rosicrucian order, is always bound to benefit everyone who practices it, and can never under any circumstances cause any harm to anyone. We may also say that there are other helps that have not been mentioned here, which are communicated to those who have proved their worth by their persistence, and while they do not directly aim at the evolution of spiritual sight, this will be evolved by all who practice them with the necessary faithful perseverance.